Ever stand in that grocery aisle just like overwhelmed by all the food
Oh,
labels?
yeah.
Grass-fed, free range, no antibiotics. They all sound amazing. But do they actually mean anything?
Right.
Well, in this deep dive, we're going to break down those animal raising claims.
Yeah.
We're going to figure out what's true, what's just clever marketing,
Yeah.
and how you can become a more informed shopper so you're not getting tricked.
Yeah, you hit on something that trips up a lot of people. It can feel like you need to be a farmer just to understand it all.
Right.
Luckily, there's actually this document that's made to help with that.
Really?
Yeah.
Tell me more.
It's from the USDA, and it's called the Food Safety and Inspection Service Compliance Guideline on Documentation Needed to Substantiate Animal Raising Claims for Label Submissions.
Uh-huh.
I know, kind of a mouthful, but basically, it's like the rule book for both the companies making these claims
Okay.
and also for shoppers who are trying to figure out what they actually mean.
So there are rules. This is getting interesting.
There are.
Okay, so where do these rules even start?
Well, it starts with, just defining what these words mean,
Okay.
just so we're all on the same page.
Right.
For example, you see grass-fed beef.
Huh.
Sounds pretty
Yeah,
straightforward,
no.
right?
Cow ate grass. Done.
It's a little more complicated than that, unfortunately.
Okay. I'm intrigued. What's the catch with grass-fed?
Well, the USDA, they say there's a difference between grass-fed and grass-finished.
Okay.
Grass-fed just means that the cattle, they ate grass for most of their life, but they could still be given grain at the end before,
Oh,
you
interesting.
become food, and that can change how the meat tastes and even the nutrition in it.
So even if the cow is out on a pasture its whole life, it could still basically end up tasting like grain-fed beef?
Exactly. And the grass-finished beef, that's usually higher in those good omega-3s, and a lot of people think it tastes better too.
That is really good to know. Okay, so I'm already starting to see how these labels can be a little more complicated than they first seem.
Yeah, and it really shows why you've got to pay attention to what the words actually mean.
Yes.
Let's take another example, free-range poultry.
Okay, so I immediately pictured chickens just roaming free.
Yeah.
Happy chickens.
It's a nice thought.
Right.
And that's sort of the ideal.
Yeah.
But this guideline from the FSIS, it knows that things aren't always perfect in the real world,
Right.
especially when it comes to things like, weather.
Oh, yeah.
So if you got poultry in the north where it gets really cold and snowy, they might not be able to go outside all the time in the winter.
So even free range needs a little asterisk depending on where you live.
Yeah, exactly. You got to keep that in mind.
Okay.
And to make it even trickier, let's talk about hormones.
Ooh, hormones. Now, I always just assumed most meat was hormone-free these days.
That's what people think.
Yeah.
But it actually depends on the animal. They all have different rules about hormones.
Gee, this is news to me.
Yeah. So, for example, you can't give any added hormones to poultry or goats or veal calves,
Okay.
mature sheep,
Wow.
even exotic things like bison.
Interesting.
So if you see a label on those that says no hormones, it's kind of,
Meaningless.
it doesn't really tell you anything because they couldn't give them hormones anyway.
So that's more just a marketing thing?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
But here's the kicker. Swine, or pigs, as most people know them,
Okay.
they actually can be given hormones.
Wow. I always thought hormone-free pork was just a given.
Nope. Another misconception.
Wow. This deep dive is already blowing my mind.
And that's why we do it. Knowledge is power, right?
Yeah.
And speaking of powerful labels, let's talk about organic.
Okay, yeah, organic. So that basically means they didn't use hormones or antibiotics, right?
It's part of it, but the USDA organic label, it means a whole lot more than that.
Oh, okay.
It covers everything. What the animals eat, where they live, how they're treated.
Wow.
And yeah, no antibiotics or added hormones are allowed.
So it's like that label covers it all.
Pretty much, it's like a shortcut. If you see organic, they had to meet a lot of requirements.
That's super helpful for shoppers, I feel like. But how do we know they're really doing all that? Anyone can slap a label on something.
That's a great point. It can't just be a free-for-all, right?
Right. So how do we know companies are actually doing what they say they are?
You're right to be skeptical. It's not just about taking their word for it.
Right.
They have to actually prove it.
Okay, so it's not enough to just say, trust us, it's all good. What kind of proof are we talking about here?
Imagine you're on a jury, right?
Okay.
And you're trying to decide if this claim is true. What would convince you?
Ooh, that's a good way to think about it. I'd probably want to see super detailed records.
Yeah.
Maybe even inspection reports or something like that.
Exactly. And the FSIS guideline gets that.
Okay.
Companies, They've got to show their work, basically.
Oh, interesting.
So for each claim they're making, they need to give these really specific descriptions of what they're actually doing on the farm or at the facility.
So, like, if I'm picturing a carton of eggs that says cage-free, it's not enough to just say, like, oh, yeah, the hens, they have plenty of space to walk around.
Yep.
They got to give the specifics.
They have to explain exactly what their housing system is like, how they make sure those hens can actually move around,
Okay.
how they give them access to food and water, places to nest.
So it's all about transparency?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No vague language allowed.
Love that.
And it goes even further than just writing it all down.
Oh.
The people who actually raise the animals, the farmers, they often have to personally sign these statements saying, yes, this is really how we do things.
Wow. So there's, like, actual accountability there?
Oh, yeah, they're putting their name on it. And then to really tie it all together, there's traceability.
Traceability. What is that? Is that like a farm-to-table tracking system?
You got it.
Oh, cool.
It means they keep these detailed records throughout the animal's entire life,
Oh, wow.
from the day they're born to, when they're processed.
Wow.
That way, if anyone ever questions anything, investigators can trace that piece of meat or that carton of eggs all the way back to the source.
That is very cool. So there's like a paper trail for my food, basically.
Exactly. It's all about keeping everyone honest.
I love it.
And for people who want that extra level of assurance, that's where those third-party certifications come in.
Right, right. Like those certified humane labels you see sometimes. Those always seem really official.
They are,
Do those like go above and beyond just the regular requirements?
for sure.
Okay.
You've got groups like the USDA's own Process Verified program,
Okay.
and then all these other certifiers out there.
Okay.
And they've got their own rules, which are often even tougher than the baseline stuff.
Wow. So they really hold those companies to a high standard.
Yeah, they'll do audits. They'll actually visit the farms,
Okay.
make sure they're really following through.
So if I'm at the store and I see a label from one of those groups, that's a good sign.
Definitely a good sign. It means the company went the extra mile. Now, let's say a company, they're doing great, they've got all these labels,
Okay.
and then they want to add a new supplier.
Okay, yeah, to keep up with demand.
Exactly.
What makes sense?
So do you think that new supplier, do they have to follow the same rules?
Well, they would have to, right? Otherwise, the whole system kind of falls apart.
Exactly.
Right.
And the FSIS guideline, it's got that covered.
Okay, good.
They've got this whole process for adding a new supplier,
Okay.
and it's all about making sure those new guys are playing by the same rules.
So what's involved there? Is it just like a quick phone call, like, hey, you good? Or is there like a whole review process?
It's way more intense than a phone call.
Oh, good.
They got to formally ask the FSIS for permission,
Okay.
and then they have to go through basically the same documentation process all over again.
Okay, wow.
So we're talking about detailed descriptions of that new supplier's practices,
Right.
signed statements saying they're following the rules,
Wow.
the whole 9 yards.
So it's not just like a rubber stamp.
Definitely not.
Wow. Okay, they really thought of everything when they were putting these guidelines together.
Right.
I feel like I'm getting like a crash course in food label law or something.
It's a whole world behind the scenes.
It really is. So even with all these rules and regulations, aren't some labels still better than others?
That's such a good question.
Like, yeah, a company could just meet the bare minimum to get a label,
Yeah,
but some companies really go above and beyond.
you're absolutely right. Even if something technically follows all the rules, that doesn't mean it's always the best choice.
Right.
And that's where those third-party certifications, those could be really helpful.
Right, we were talking about this earlier. They usually have even stricter rules than the USDA, right?
Yeah, they often do. Plus, they're out there actually checking.
So they're like the overachievers of the food label world?
Exactly. They really care about this stuff.
Okay, that makes sense.
And don't forget, you can always do a little detective work yourself.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah. Look at the company's website, see what they say about their practices, where they get their products.
Oh, that's smart. So it's not just about the label itself, it's about the company as a whole.
Exactly. The more you know, the better choices you can make.
I am loving this. This deep dive has been so informative. I feel like I can actually like decipher these labels now.
That's what we like to hear.
No more standing in the aisle, totally clueless. I can confidently pick out the good stuff.
You got it. Knowledge is power, my friend.
Yes. Huge thank you to our expert for breaking it all down for us today.
My pleasure.
And for everyone listening, be sure to check out our show notes.
Yeah, good stuff in there.
We'll have links to the FSIS guidelines so you can really
Alright.
geek out.
Go down that rabbit hole.
Exactly. And all those other resources we talked about. Happy shopping, everyone.